Good evening. My presentation tonight is Against Hope, a primer on complexity and collapse. In the 1890s, my great-great-grandfather took his kids and joined thousands of bankrupted farm families, the victims of industrialization, the robber barons, and the 20-year-long depression, migrating to the cities to work in the mines and factories. Theodore Pollard wrote in his diary that he'd given his life to try to make the world better for his children and grandchildren, but feared that he had failed. When will he learn, he wondered, that every time there is a jump in inequality, the result is suffering, violence, and war? He felt hopeless. More than a tumultuous century later, many of us are again feeling hopeless. Raise your hands if you are still hopeful. That's awesome. I'll see what I can do to disabuse you of that foolishness. But why shouldn't we be hopeful? We have bold new leaders to deal with economic crisis and climate change, right? Complexity theory explains why, despite our best efforts to make the world better, we seem inevitably headed for runaway climate change and an economic upheaval so complete no large-scale technology, political entity, or system of laws, trade, or currency will survive it. We are headed, some climate scientists and futurists tell us now, for a period of massive migration such as we last experienced during the ice ages 20,000 years ago, and a return to local, low-tech, transient subsistence societies with many fewer humans. Still, we should be hopeful, right? Our leaders have our backs, and they'll manage us through any crisis. Well, maybe not, but a study of complex systems indicates it really doesn't matter who's in power or how we try to reform our broken systems. Nature teaches us that all complex systems self-perpetuate despite all attempts to change them until they quickly and catastrophically collapse. So, for example, when governments raise taxes or mandate increases in wages, corporations move offshore so tax revenues and real wages actually fall. And when companies innovate more fuel-efficient vehicles, car owners drive further in these vehicles so that emissions actually increase. This is called the Jevons paradox. When rights groups get involved in regulatory approvals and treaty negotiations, the deals they strike are usually worse for the environment and occupied peoples than deals struck directly with government. And when big pharma and agribusiness introduce antibiotics and herbicides, we get deadly antibiotic-resistant diseases and Roundup-resistant weeds. We mess with complex systems at our peril. And every civilization collapses once it becomes unsustainable. This one will do so spectacularly, given its unprecedented global size. The systems will resist all attempts at reform until they finally crash. Try as we must, it is hopeless to try to change them. Simply put, we are not in control. Humans cannot save the world. Derrick Jensen, in his wonderful piece Beyond Hope, says that hope merely serves the needs of those in power and is nothing more than a secular way of keeping us in line. So what do we do? How do we let go? British philosopher John Gray explains this requires a local focus on things you can really control and affect, and an attitude of contemplative gratitude, letting go, doing less, consuming less, needing less, working less, and instead just being in the moment, in places you love with people you love, like this place. This doesn't mean doing nothing. As Derrick writes, a wonderful thing happens when you give up on hope. You realize you never needed it in the first place. You cease relying on someone or something else to solve our problems. Politicians, God, technologists, Greenpeace, or some humanitarian miracle, and you just begin doing whatever is needed here, now, yourself. In his book, A Short History of Progress, Canadian author Ronald Wright says, if we blow up or degrade the biosphere so it can no longer sustain us, nature will merely shrug and conclude that letting apes run the laboratory was fun for a while, but in the end, a bad idea. That doesn't mean we should be full of grief or despair. Life is really, really good, and too often we miss it in the desperate business of trying to make it better, being who we think we should be, and doing what we think we should be doing. Recently, I wrote a short article for Utne Reader magazine called 10 Things to Do When You're Feeling Hopeless. Here's 6 items from that list on the off chance they'll make you feel not hopeful, but inspired to let go and move beyond hope. So here we go. Number 1, liberate yourself from dependence on and fear for the end of global industrial systems. There is a more joyful, sustainable, and self-sufficient way to live. Number 2, be good to yourself. Give yourself time and opportunity to heal from the modern dehumanizing culture that has wounded us all. Number 3, listen to kids. Talk about what they care about. They are still living in the present without the need for hope for a better future. Number 4, learn to be present like wild creatures. Spend time in wild places and with animals. Number 5, avoid unactionable news and those dreaded self-help books. Imagine what could be right now. Number 6, not what you hope for the future. Then bring it to life. Make it real through art or learning something new. We are meant to love this world with all of our hearts and not fear it or our future. If you're interested in learning more about complexity and getting the rest of this article, please check out my blog, link coming up on the next slide. It's very possible that the era after civilization will be humanity's true golden era, joyful, connected, sustainable, community-based, and amazingly diverse societies. Our descendants may wonder why we ever wanted civilization to last. In the meantime, it's hopeless, but we'll be fine. Thank you.